Fire was more than a simple flicker in the dark. It was the heartbeat of survival. For Neanderthals, it was warmth on a night when the cold gnawed at every inch of skin, a shield against the icy breath of the winds that swept across frozen landscapes. Imagine standing outside a cave, snow crunching beneath your feet, and the bitter wind threatening to steal life itself. In such a world, the ability to harness fire was nothing short of miraculous. It transformed the impossible into the bearable, the terrifying into the manageable. Beyond warmth, fire became a center of life. It allowed food to be cooked, unlocking nutrients that raw meat and plants could not offer. Imagine the slow, careful tending of embers, the patience it demanded, and the reward it brought in meals that nourished both body and mind. Fire shaped daily rhythms, guiding when to rest and when to move, marking moments of safety and respite in a harsh, unpredictable environment. But fire was more than utility, it was social glue. Around flickering flames, groups gathered, sharing stories, planning hunts, and forging bonds that would define survival. The dance of shadows on cave walls may have sparked the earliest forms of expression, curiosity, and imagination. Could warmth really come from something other than the sun itself? How do you survive a lifetime without such a constant companion? Every spark held promise and peril. Fire demanded attention, skill, and respect, teaching lessons in patience and ingenuity. For Neanderthals, it was both tool and teacher, shaping the rhythm of life and the bonds between people. In the quiet glow, one could glimpse the essence of survival itself, a delicate balance between human ingenuity and the relentless challenge of the world outside. The human body is remarkable, but the Neanderthals' bodies were extraordinary, sculpted by tens of thousands of years in a frozen world. Imagine a life where every breath clouds in the air, where frost can bite through exposed skin in moments, and where survival depends on both strength and subtle adaptation. Their frames were stockier and more muscular than ours, with wide rib cages that held resilient lungs capable of enduring the thin, cold air. Their limbs were shorter, compact, and powerful, built to conserve heat and generate energy efficiently in a climate that spared little mercy. Every curve and contour of their bodies was a story written by the ice and snow. But it was not just their physical form that defined them. Their minds were equally attuned to the harshness around them. Early humans in the Ice Age needed more than instinct. They needed planning, memory, and ingenuity. They memorized the shifting trails of herds across frozen plains, predicted the movements of predators, and recognized subtle signs of changing weather. Survival demanded attention to detail, the ability to cooperate, and an understanding of patterns in nature that modern humans often overlook. Could the human body really adapt to survive such extremes? In the Neanderthals, we see evidence that it could. Their genetic legacy whispers clues about resilience, immunity, and even cognitive skills shaped for endurance. Every bone, every muscle, every carefully placed tool hints at a being designed not just to live, but to thrive in an environment that would humble most creatures. In observing these adaptations, it becomes clear that their world was one of both constant challenge and remarkable triumph. Life was harsh, yes, but it was also rich with ingenuity, with lessons hidden in the quiet strength of a body and mind honed for survival. As we look back, we are invited to marvel not just at what they endured, but at the remarkable ways they met the frozen wilderness head-on, turning the Ice Age from a threat into a stage upon which their resilience could shine. Life for Neanderthals was structured around rhythms dictated by the land, the seasons, and the relentless cold. Each day followed a pattern honed by necessity, a blend of repetition and careful observation that ensured survival in a world where a single misstep could prove fatal. As dawn's pale light stretched across frozen plains, groups would emerge from the relative safety of their shelters, scanning the horizon for signs of game or edible plants hidden beneath snow. Every movement, every choice was deliberate, shaped by generations of experience and the quiet urgency of daily survival. Hunting was both a ritual and a test of skill. Tracking a herd required patience, intuition, and a deep understanding of the animal's habits. The land might appear barren, yet subtle clues, footprints, broken branches, faint scents, revealed where life persisted. Could they sense patterns invisible to an untrained eye? How did they endure the risk, balancing hunger against danger? Each successful hunt brought nourishment, but also reaffirmed knowledge of the environment and of each other, strengthening the bonds that held the group together. Foraging complemented hunting, often requiring ingenuity and a willingness to explore the frozen edges of their territory. Roots, berries, nuts, and even frozen herbs became precious resources. Collecting them demanded patience and care, as the landscape offered both sustenance and hidden hazards. These daily journeys were quiet and meditative, a slow rhythm that defined existence, allowing the mind to notice details that might otherwise go unseen. Sheltering was another essential rhythm. Preparing caves, insulating them with hides, and tending fires created pockets of warmth and security. These spaces became centers of life, where storytelling, tool-making, and rest unfolded under the soft glow of embers. What rituals brought comfort in such an unforgiving world? Even in simplicity, these routines offered familiarity, safety, and a subtle sense of beauty. Through these patterns, hunting, foraging, and sheltering, Neanderthals lived lives of constant attentiveness, yet also of quiet reflection. Their days were a dance between danger and mastery, repetition and observation, survival and subtle joy. In following their rhythm, we glimpse a world both harsh and mesmerizing, a world that invites calm curiosity and deep admiration. Fire was not always a given, it was earned, coaxed from fragile embers or captured from nature's unpredictable sparks. For Neanderthals, discovering fire required patience, skill, and a deep understanding of the environment. Lightning-struck trees, smoldering rocks, or volcanic activity could offer the first flicker of warmth, but carrying it, keeping it alive, and using it wisely demanded both ingenuity and cooperation. Imagine the delicate care required to preserve a single ember as it was transported across snowy plains, a glowing lifeline in an otherwise frozen world. The act of creating fire may have been even more astonishing. Some scholars suggest Neanderthals learned to strike stones or rub dry wood to produce sparks. Each attempt was a test of attention, timing, and dexterity. Could a single spark ignite hope or stave off disaster? Every ember held life and risk intertwined. A misplaced action could snuff it out, leaving cold and hunger in its place. This daily dance with fire was a testament to human determination and the delicate interplay between observation and action. Inside the caves, fire transformed spaces into realms of comfort and survival. Hearths became focal points, illuminating faces, tools, and the rough textures of stone walls. The careful tending of flames was a ritual in itself, adding kindling, adjusting embers, and shielding the glow from sudden drafts. These acts were small, deliberate, and deeply meaningful, creating pockets of warmth that allowed sleep, conversation, and planning to continue even when the world outside remained mercilessly cold. Coaxing life from a fragile ember was more than survival. It was an intimate, tactile connection to the forces of nature. Each flicker reminded the Neanderthals of their ingenuity, their reliance on one another, and the fragile balance between life and the unyielding ice. Fire, in its warmth and unpredictability, became both companion and teacher, guiding the rhythm of their days and shaping the social and practical fabric of their lives. Fire was more than warmth. It was a gathering point, a silent mediator between the harsh world outside and the fragile comfort within. Around flickering flames, Neanderthals found more than light. They found each other. The glow of embers illuminated faces, revealing expressions, gestures, and subtle cues that strengthened social bonds. Could warmth really bring people closer even in a frozen world? In these small circles, trust was built, plans were shared, and knowledge passed quietly from one generation to the next. Stories likely emerged in the firelight, carried in gestures, sounds, and early language. Tales of hunts, near escapes, and the rhythms of daily life may have danced along cave walls, shadows moving in sync with the imagination of those who watched. Each narrative was more than entertainment. It was education, a subtle guide to survival and strategy. What secrets were shared by the firelight? How did a crackling ember inspire innovation, caution, or hope? The fire became a classroom, a council, and a stage all at once. Fire also offered protection, both real and psychological. The glow kept predators at bay and illuminated the immediate surroundings, offering a sense of security even when the darkness pressed in. Its warmth allowed bodies to rest, muscles to recover, and minds to linger in reflection, fostering a quiet intimacy that might have been impossible without such light. Within this space, relationships were nurtured, conflicts softened, and the group's cohesion strengthened. In many ways, fire shaped culture itself. Its presence created rituals of tending and sharing, of storytelling and observation that rippled through daily life. Each flame, fragile yet persistent, symbolized the balance between human ingenuity and the untamed world. In the hush of the cave, with shadows dancing on walls and faces illuminated in amber light, fire reminded the Neanderthals, and reminds us even now, of the profound ways warmth, light, and attention could weave communities together. It was a companion, a teacher, and a quiet witness to the unfolding story of survival. Hunting in the Ice Age was a delicate blend of strategy, courage, and patience. For Neanderthals, survival often depended on confronting creatures that dwarfed their own strength, from the massive woolly mammoth to the formidable aurochs that roamed the frozen plains. Could you face a mammoth with only stone tools, relying on sharp edges, spears, and careful coordination? Each hunt required careful observation, tracking footprints in the snow, reading subtle signs of movement, and predicting behavior that could mean the difference between feast and famine. These hunts were rarely impulsive. Groups would plan carefully, often following herds for days, learning their rhythms and selecting the safest approach. Knowledge of terrain was critical. Ambush points, narrow passes, and frozen river crossings could be leveraged to gain advantage. The Neanderthals' understanding of their environment was intimate, almost meditative, as they balanced the thrill of pursuit with the pressing need for caution. Every step forward was calculated, every decision weighed against risk and reward. The actual encounter demanded precision, cooperation, and timing. Spears had to be thrust with care, stones positioned to distract or injure, and movements synchronized to avoid disaster. The tension of waiting in silence, hearts pounding in anticipation, was part of the rhythm of survival. How did they plan, track, and survive the hunt? It was a test of knowledge, skill, and trust in one another. Even after a successful hunt, work continued. Large carcasses were carefully divided, preserved, and transported, providing nourishment for days. But beyond food, these hunts reinforced social bonds. Cooperation was essential, and every shared effort strengthened trust and cohesion. The thrill, the danger, and the subtle artistry of tracking and taking down a giant left a quiet awe, a deep connection to the land and its creatures. Through these hunts, the Neanderthals demonstrated more than physical strength. They showed ingenuity, patience, and an intimate understanding of life in a frozen world. Each pursuit was a lesson in resilience, a dance between predator and prey, strategy and risk, skill and survival. In imagining their courage, we glimpse the quiet heroism woven into the rhythm of Ice Age life. Beyond the thrill of hunting, survival relied equally on the quiet diligence of gathering. Even in a landscape locked in ice, the Neanderthals knew where life persisted and how to find it. Roots hidden beneath snow, frozen berries clinging stubbornly to branches, and hardy herbs tucked into rocky crevices offered nourishment to those who knew where to look. What secrets did the frozen landscape hide? Each plant, each morsel, became a vital thread in the fabric of daily survival. Gathering required patience and observation. Neanderthals studied the land with care, learning which plants thrived in which conditions, which berries were safe to eat, and which roots could be dug up without damaging the fragile ecosystem. Even in the harshest winter, subtle signs, discolored leaves, faint tracks, and the shape of ice along a stream revealed hidden bounty. Could survival truly be found in the smallest leaf or root? For these early humans, it often was. The act of collecting was methodical and meditative. Hands moved with deliberate precision, eyes scanning for movement or color, minds alert to danger while also appreciating the small marvels of the environment. These journeys through frost-bitten forests and frozen plains created a rhythm of quiet focus, balancing the intensity of hunting with the calm of attentive observation. Beyond nourishment, gathering reinforced knowledge of the land and fostered subtle social rituals. Resources were often shared, with elders guiding younger members in the best techniques and safe choices. This exchange of practical wisdom deepened communal bonds, providing both sustenance and connection. Through gathering, Neanderthals exhibited patience, ingenuity, and a profound understanding of the world around them. In the quiet, repetitive movements of foraging, they maintained life, cultivated knowledge, and discovered that even in the harshest conditions, the earth offered sustenance to those willing to look carefully and respect its hidden gifts. The hunt and the gather were only part of survival. How Neanderthals shared what they obtained was equally vital. After a successful hunt or careful foraging, the group faced decisions that could affect not just immediate nourishment, but the cohesion and trust within the community. How did they decide who ate first? Could fairness itself be a tool for survival? In these moments, the distribution of food became both practical and profoundly social. Carcasses and gathered plants were divided with care, guided by experience, need, and subtle social rules. Elders and skilled hunters often received respect for their efforts, but the survival of the entire group depended on balance. Everyone had a role, and every mouth needed feeding to ensure strength for the challenges ahead. Sharing was not random. It was a carefully orchestrated system that reinforced bonds, fostered cooperation, and created trust among individuals whose lives depended on one another. These shared meals were more than sustenance. Around the warmth of a fire or within the shelter of a cave, food became a medium for connection. Conversations, spoken in early language or expressed through gestures, passed knowledge from one generation to the next. Stories of hunts, Strategies for tracking animals and subtle lessons about the environment were exchanged alongside the meat and roots. Could fairness and shared effort be as vital as strength or cunning? In the Neanderthals' world, it certainly seemed so. Through the act of sharing, social bonds strengthened, and the group's cohesion became a tool of survival. Cooperation allowed them to endure winters that were otherwise merciless, ensuring that each individual could contribute to and benefit from the community. The rhythms of giving and receiving created patterns of trust and empathy, quietly teaching lessons about interdependence and resilience. Even in the harshest conditions, life was woven together through these shared moments. Food was never merely sustenance. It was a thread connecting past to present, hunter to gatherer, elder to youth. In this careful balance, the Neanderthals demonstrated that survival relied not only on skill and strength, but on the enduring bonds that made a group greater than the sum of its parts. Caves were more than shelter. They were sanctuaries carved by nature and shaped by human hands. For Neanderthals, choosing the right cave was a matter of life and death. Some offered protection from relentless winds, while others provided vantage points to survey the surrounding terrain for prey or lurking predators. What made one cave safer than another? The selection required careful observation of entrances, the thickness of stone walls, the way sunlight or moonlight filtered through openings, and a deep understanding of how the environment could either nurture life or expose it to danger. Once a suitable cave was found, subtle modifications could transform it into a livable home. Stones were arranged to block drafts, depressions in the ground were filled with soft moss or animal hides, and hearths were carefully positioned to provide warmth without suffocating the space with smoke. Even the walls themselves became canvases, textured surfaces capturing marks, scratches, or faint traces of decoration. These subtle adornments may have told stories of hunts, important events, or spiritual reflections, sharing meaning without a single spoken word. How did walls communicate experience across time and generations? Life inside the cave followed its own gentle rhythm. The soft flicker of firelight illuminated corners where tools were kept, hides were draped for warmth, and children huddled close to learn, observe, and rest. Sounds were muted, creating a sense of calm, and the smell of smoke, combined with earth and fur, formed a sensory tapestry that grounded every individual in their environment. Within these rocky shelters, the Neanderthals cultivated a sense of intimacy and belonging. The cave was more than a refuge. It was a place of learning, reflection, and connection. Every selection, modification, and subtle marking echoed their understanding of the world and each other, quietly offering safety, comfort, and a stage on which the rhythms of life continued against the backdrop of a frozen and unpredictable world. In a world where the cold could steal life within hours, clothing was more than comfort. It was survival. Neanderthals turned the materials around them into practical armor against the relentless frost. Thick furs, carefully treated animal hides, and layers of woven plant fibers became essential shields, protecting the body from the bitter winds and icy landscapes. Could ingenuity in clothing mean the difference between life and death? For these early humans, it certainly did, as warmth and mobility dictated whether a hunt would succeed or a winter would be endured. Crafting these garments required observation, skill, and creativity. Skins were scraped and softened, furs layered and stitched using bone needles or sharpened thorns. Each piece was tailored to the environment, covering vital areas while allowing freedom of movement. Footwear, often overlooked in imagination, was equally vital, protecting feet from frostbite and providing traction across ice and snow. Even small innovations, wrapping furs around the head or layering softer pelts beneath tougher hides, could extend life in extreme conditions. How creative could survival be when every stitch might protect the vulnerable or empower a hunter on the frozen plains? Clothing was also deeply tied to identity and social cohesion. Shared techniques, patterns, and materials were passed between generations, creating both practical and cultural continuity. Young Neanderthals learned not just how to cover their bodies, but how to interpret the signs of the seasons, when to add layers, and which hides offered the most warmth. Knowledge became woven into every seam, turning garments into lessons in adaptation and resilience. Beyond warmth, clothing offered a quiet confidence. A properly prepared individual could move across frozen landscapes with assurance, engage in hunts or foraging, and withstand nights that would otherwise be unbearable. In these layers of fur and hide, ingenuity met necessity, revealing a species both resourceful and intimate with the natural world. Every coat, every wrapped foot, every carefully stitched seam spoke of adaptation, skill, and the subtle artistry that kept life flickering steadily amid the Ice Age's harsh embrace. Within the shelter of a cave or under the protection of a rock overhang, space became more than physical. It shaped the rhythm of daily life and the bonds between people. Neanderthals organized their living areas with purpose, creating distinct zones for cooking, crafting tools, and gathering for conversation or rest. How did space influence relationships? Even the arrangement of hearths and work areas subtly guided interactions, encouraging cooperation, observation, and shared responsibility. The careful placement of fire, stone tools, and hides transformed cold, dark spaces into centers of warmth and connection. Cooking areas were hubs of both survival and community. The smell of roasted meat or heated roots carried through the cave, signaling nourishment and offering comfort after long hours in the frozen world outside. Around these fires, individuals could share tasks, watch over the young, and pass on techniques for preparing food. Even simple gestures, handing a piece of meat, adjusting an ember, or tending to a pot created subtle bonds, reinforcing the interdependence of the group. Could warmth bring people closer even in a frozen world? In these small acts, the answer was clear. Crafting spaces offered another form of intimacy. Stones were sharpened, hides stitched, and tools assembled in quiet focus. The repetition of work created a rhythm, almost meditative, that balanced the intensity of hunting and foraging. Skills were taught and observed, knowledge quietly exchanged in gestures, demonstrations, or shared attention. In these spaces, every action was both practical and social, reinforcing trust and collaboration while fostering a sense of shared purpose. Finally, communal areas became stages for storytelling and reflection. Shadows flickered on walls as the firelight danced, hinting at imagined hunts, remembered experiences, or lessons about the land. Even without spoken words, movement, gesture, and expression conveyed meaning, offering a subtle education and the comfort of human presence. These spaces, organized yet flexible, allowed survival to coexist with imagination, reflection, and quiet connection. In these carefully tended areas, the Neanderthals wove warmth, utility, and social cohesion into every corner. Space itself became a companion, guiding interaction, sustaining life, and shaping the gentle pulse of communal existence, creating a world where cooperation and curiosity could flourish even amid the Ice Age's relentless cold. Communication was the invisible thread that wove Neanderthal communities together. Without the words we take for granted today, they relied on a combination of gestures, vocalizations, and subtle expressions to share essential information. How did they convey danger when a predator approached, or signal the success of a hunt, or even share the quiet joy of a warm fire? Every movement of the hands, every tone of the voice, became meaningful in ways that were both practical and profoundly human. Gestures were precise and deliberate, forming a vocabulary of body language that could express urgency, instruction, or reassurance. A raised arm, a pointed finger, a shift in posture could convey warning, guidance, or permission. In the dim glow of a cave, these silent signals were critical, allowing coordination during hunts, signaling hidden dangers outside, or guiding younger members in the use of tools. Vocalizations added another layer of complexity. While not yet a fully developed language, Neanderthals likely used a range of sounds, grunts, calls, and rhythmic noises that could communicate emotion, attract attention, or coordinate movement. Could a series of clicks or hums carry enough meaning to direct a hunting party or soothe a restless infant? Evidence suggests that they were capable of subtle nuance, blending sound and gesture in ways that hinted at shared understanding and cognitive sophistication. Even the environment played a role in communication. Echoes in caves amplified warnings, the crackle of a fire could signal gathering points, and rhythmic tapping on stone or wood might convey messages across short distances. In these interactions, Neanderthals demonstrated early creativity, adapting the tools at hand, both their bodies and the world around them, to meet the demands of community and survival. Through these combined methods, Neanderthals were able to sustain a culture of cooperation, trust, and shared knowledge. Even without words as we know them, they navigated danger, celebrated success, and passed lessons across generations. In imagining these forms of communication, we gain insight not just into their survival, but into the roots of human connection itself, where every gesture and sound carried meaning, intimacy, and the promise of understanding. Even in the harsh grip of the Ice Age, Neanderthals expressed a sense of beauty and meaning that transcended survival. Cave walls, stone fragments, and simple objects became canvases for imagination and communication. Could beauty exist even in the coldest, most unforgiving landscapes? The traces they left behind suggest that art was more than decoration. It was a reflection of thought, memory, and the subtle pulse of human curiosity. Cave paintings often depicted animals, abstract patterns, or handprints, etched and pigmented with care. Each line carried intention, each mark a message or a memory frozen in time. Shadows flickered across these surfaces as firelight danced nearby, breathing life into the figures and patterns. What stories were painted in these shadows? Perhaps they recorded hunts, celebrated successes, or honored creatures that were both sustenance and inspiration. Carvings and small objects also held symbolic weight. Stones, bones, and antlers were shaped into tools or ornaments, each demonstrating skill, patience, and an awareness of aesthetics. Some may have served ritualistic or social purposes, quietly communicating status, identity, or belief systems. Even simple marks could convey meaning, offering insight into the inner world of a species we often imagine only through survival. Art became a subtle bridge between the practical and the profound. Around a fire or within a shelter, individuals could reflect on these creations, teaching younger members through imitation, observation, and shared attention. The act of creation itself reinforced focus, patience, and a sense of connection, both to the group and to the wider natural world. In the quiet stillness of a cave, with frost pressing against the walls and the embers casting amber light, Neanderthals, art reminds us that even amid struggle, humans seek expression. These marks, symbols, and patterns offer glimpses of thought, emotion, and imagination, bridging the gap between necessity and creativity. They reveal that survival is not only about sustenance or warmth, but also about capturing, celebrating, and understanding the experience of being alive, even in the coldest corners of history. Even in the harshest conditions, Neanderthals seem to recognize that life held more than immediate survival. Evidence suggests they engaged in rituals, subtle acts that expressed respect, remembrance, and perhaps even curiosity about life and death. Did they ponder mortality as we do, wondering what lay beyond the frozen plains and shadowed caves? Small gestures, arranging bodies carefully, placing objects nearby, or marking the ground, hint at a consciousness that extended beyond the present moment. Burial practices, when observed, were deliberate. Bodies were positioned with care, sometimes accompanied by tools, animal bones, or ochre. These acts suggest a desire to honor the individual, providing both physical and symbolic protection in the afterlife, or at least preserving memory for those left behind. Such rituals may have comforted the living as much as the dead, offering a sense of continuity, order, and understanding in a world that was otherwise unpredictable and unforgiving. Beyond burials, everyday rituals likely offered structure and reassurance. Repetitive gestures around the hearth, patterns of movement during hunts, and shared attention to symbolic objects could all be considered forms of ritual. These practices helped organize social life, reinforce bonds, and provide a gentle sense of control over a harsh environment. In contemplating these rituals, we glimpse a species capable of reflection, empathy, and meaning-making. Every careful placement, every small act of ceremony, speaks to a mind seeking comfort, understanding, and connection. Even without elaborate language or written record, Neanderthals created spaces for memory, respect, and quiet contemplation. Through these subtle rituals and beliefs, they nurtured resilience and community, reminding us that survival was not only about enduring the cold and finding food, but also about finding ways to honor life, soothe the mind, and make sense of existence in a world that demanded both courage and reflection. The Neanderthals' lives were defined by a constant negotiation with their environment, a delicate balance of ingenuity, observation, and endurance. Every decision, from selecting a cave, tracking a herd, or tending a fragile ember, was a lesson in adaptation. Could their struggles teach us something about resilience, even in our modern world? Though separated by tens of thousands of years, the echoes of their survival strategies offer insights into patience, problem-solving, and the quiet power of preparation. One of the clearest lessons lies in their ability to observe and learn from nature. They read landscapes, tracked animals, and understood seasonal cycles, turning subtle signs into practical knowledge. This attentiveness reminds us of the value of slowing down, noticing patterns, and adapting thoughtfully rather than acting impulsively. Each small skill, from layering furs to storing food, was part of a broader strategy, showing that survival is not solely about strength, but also about foresight and resourcefulness. Social cohesion offers another lesson. Neanderthals shared food, knowledge, and responsibility, creating systems of trust that ensured the group thrived. Cooperation was not incidental, it was essential. In observing their reliance on one another, we can reflect on the importance of community, empathy, and shared effort, realizing that even the most independent individuals benefit from connection. Even their cultural and symbolic practices hold meaning for us. Storytelling, art, and ritual enriched their lives, providing comfort, identity, and continuity. These acts demonstrate that survival is not purely physical. It encompasses the emotional and cognitive dimensions of existence. Moments of reflection, creativity, and shared understanding were as vital as the hunt or the fire. By considering the Neanderthals' approach to life, we gain more than historical knowledge. We see a species that mastered adversity through observation, cooperation, and imagination. Their legacy reminds us that resilience is built in small, deliberate actions, in learning from the environment, and in nurturing bonds that extend beyond the self. Even today, their lives whisper lessons about courage, ingenuity, and the quiet power of being fully attuned to the world around us. For hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthals thrived across Europe and parts of Asia, adapting to ice, mastering tools, and forming complex social bonds. Yet, like all stories, their era eventually reached a turning point. What happened to a species that had endured so much, mastering life in some of the harshest climates on Earth? Evidence suggests that changing environments, competition, and the arrival of Homo sapiens created pressures that Neanderthals could not fully overcome. The decline was gradual, a slow shift rather than a sudden collapse. As modern humans spread across the continent, bringing new hunting techniques, tools, and perhaps even different social structures, Neanderthals faced challenges in securing food, territory, and survival resources. Their numbers dwindled, yet their resilience never disappeared entirely. Instead, traces of their legacy merged with that of Homo sapiens. Interbreeding occurred, leaving small but meaningful genetic imprints in the modern human genome, a quiet reminder that their story did not end in total disappearance. This integration suggests a subtle transformation rather than a complete erasure. Knowledge, skills, and even cultural practices may have been exchanged, quietly influencing the trajectory of humanity. In this sense, Neanderthals' wisdom, their strategies for surviving ice and isolation, carried forward into a new era, folded into the lives of those who would dominate the planet for millennia to come. Could their spirit, their ingenuity, still whisper to us through these inherited traits? Even as their distinct communities faded, the Neanderthals' impact resonates today. Archaeological finds, genetic studies, and artifacts offer glimpses into a species that balanced survival, creativity, and social cohesion with remarkable sophistication. Their story is both a cautionary tale and an inspiration, a reminder that thriving is never guaranteed, but careful observation, cooperation, and adaptation leave enduring echoes. The end of the Neanderthals' era is thus not merely a tale of loss. It is a reflection on persistence, influence, and the ways life continues through subtle threads, connecting the past to the present. Their existence, once fully flesh and bone in a frozen world, now lives on in fragments of memory, culture, and DNA, whispering across time to those willing to listen. Imagine standing on a frozen plain, the wind whispering through icy ridges, and the pale light of dusk stretching across endless snow. The world is vast, silent, and still, yet life persists in quiet, measured rhythms. Neanderthals moved through this landscape with steady steps, guided by knowledge, instinct, and the warmth of shared company. As night deepens, their fires flicker softly, shadows dancing across cave walls, marking the end of another day in a frozen world. The icy winds calm, and the footprints left behind are gradually covered by fresh snow. Hunters rest, children sleep, and the flickering embers carry stories and memories forward into the quiet. Each detail, from the subtle glow of the fire to the gentle crackle of frozen wood, becomes part of a serene rhythm, inviting reflection on endurance, ingenuity, and the quiet pulse of life. Imagine the vast silence settling over valleys and plains, embracing all that remains, yet holding echoes of courage and connection within its stillness. Drifting through this frozen world, we sense the Neanderthals' intimate connection to nature, their careful attention to survival, and their gentle rituals of community. The cold may be sharp, but life persists in measured, deliberate ways, through observation, through cooperation, and through the simple beauty of being present. Even as their era fades into memory, the lessons of their lives linger, subtle and enduring, offering both awe and comfort. As the night stretches on, the frozen landscape gradually melts into soft shadows, and the mind begins to release tension. Curiosity softens, stories and struggles transform into distant echoes, and the world becomes still. Let this quiet reflection carry you into rest, a gentle drift toward sleep, accompanied by the enduring whispers of lives that once moved gracefully through snow and shadow, leaving their mark in silence, memory, and the slow, calming rhythm of the natural world.